So, after finishing with the NBA's worst record last season, the Spurs haven't exactly improved that much and aren't exactly a good basketball team yet. Obviously, the addition of Victor Wembanyama, who we'll talk about in great detail in a minute, is going to dramatically enhance the floor and ceiling of this team. But I imagine with most of their core still being fairly young, they're not going to see much success next. I think that the Spurs are going to finish as the second worst team in the NBA next year, just by record. Not necessarily worst talent-wise, but I think because of circumstance, they will end up at the bottom of the West. And let's talk about it. So, after finishing with the NBA's worst record last season, the Spurs haven't exactly improved that much and aren't exactly a good basketball team yet. Obviously, the addition of Victor Wembanyama, who we'll talk about in great detail in a minute, is going to dramatically enhance the floor and ceiling of this team. But I imagine with most of their core still being fairly young, they're not going to see much success next season. I think that the Spurs are going to finish as the second worst team in the NBA next year, just by record. Not necessarily worst talent-wise, but I think because of circumstance, they will end up at the bottom of the West. And let's talk about that. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I watched a lot of Spurs games last year because they were actively trying to be bad, and I think held out Devin Vassell for like half the season, who we'll also talk about in a minute. But I can kind of give you a rundown on this roster before we sort of get into the X's and O's. So Trey Jones, to me, seems like I guess in football terms, a system quarterback or like a game manager right now for the Spurs. He's doesn't necessarily have star potential at all, but to me, he seems like a poor man's Mike Conley. He seems like a good connector with solid scoring upside and I guess decent all-around game. I'm not really familiar with that game, but I'm assuming that he's at least average at the point. And he's also pretty young, and he's already exceeding probably a lot of the expectations for him. At the guards, I think that Malachi Branham has a lot of potential. He's a pretty electric scorer, though sometimes he gets a little bit trigger happy from what I've seen. Again, I'm not super familiar with his game, but I imagine if he pans out like what some people projected of him coming out of Ohio State, I think he could be a really nice addition to this team as well. And then if you look at a guy like Blake Wesley, I haven't really familiarized myself with his game either, but he's another allegedly promising scorer. Getting to the wings, obviously Jeremy Sohan is maybe the most wild card player on this team other than Wemby. He's got the potential to be an elite and versatile defender and a pretty good playmaker. He's got a nice all-around game, and the Dennis Rodman comparisons are somewhat merited. I think that really stems mostly from the hair thing, but he's a pretty damn good defender, and he's got a lot of versatility. He's a good rebounder. He can shoot a little bit. And he's pretty damn athletic, so he's a nice connecting player. He's got a lot of Draymond Green in him, just minus, I guess, the ball kicking. And then if we look at the other wing positions, Devin Vassell is a pretty strong scorer already with nice defensive upside and apparently some playmaking chops. He shot pretty well from three last year and is very athletic and a good slasher, though I'm not really sure what his ceiling is. He's got some Mikal Bridges in him. A lot of people have compared him to Chris Middleton, though I think he's probably going to be a bit more consistent and have, like, Chris Middleton is such an erratic player sometimes that I just think that comparison is difficult to make. I think that the Mikal Bridges comparison is definitely more fair. He probably won't be as good as a defender, nor will he reach the 26 points per game that Mikal averaged last year while he was on the Nets. But I think he can kind of get pretty close to that. I definitely think he has all-star potential pretty soon. Then Keldon Johnson is probably the oldest out of this young core. He averaged around, I think, 22 points per game last year and shot around average from three. Basically the Kyle Kuzma three-point volume, 7 attempts or something on 33% shooting. So he's probably an average shooter. He's very athletic. He's got good size and he can rebound. Though I don't know if he's elite at any one aspect of the game. And if I had to imagine this Spurs team making any moves in the near future, I imagine he could be one of the first names on the move, just because I don't think he is the type of player who necessarily lends himself well to building a elite contending level team. He's got he doesn't necessarily bring like great intangibles, but I think he's got pretty damn good scoring upside, and I think he's a pretty reliable defender. Like, he could definitely stick around and help this team win games in the short term, but I think in the long term, they're more likely to look at different options. But I could be totally wrong about that. Honestly, I'm not really sure where this Spurs team is going to go after this. And then if we look at the rest of the young players on this team, they've got a bunch of question marks. Obviously, Sandro Mamukelashvili and Sadi Sissoko and Dominic Barlow all could crack the rotation at different times during the year. I think all of them actually have nice upside. Barlow showed a lot of potential in Summer League, while Sissoko also kind of popped off. And then Mamukelashvili, I've just always really liked his name and his game. He can shoot it from 3. He's pretty athletic. But again, I'm not really super familiar. The rest of this team is composed mostly of vets and my GOAT, Cedi Osman. But I think that the veteran presence that they've added with Cedi and like keeping Doug McDermott, having a reliable point guard, I actually don't think this team is going to run into like problems that the Houston Rockets have had where their basketball is just completely unwatchable because they have no system, especially with Pop staying for the next 3 years. So I actually think the Spurs have an okay system around Wembanyama, who we should talk about now. Obviously, he is like one of the most intriguing prospects in the history of sports. I think immediately he's going to raise their defensive floor and ceiling dramatically, so obviously Wembanyama is going to dramatically enhance this team's defense probably from day one. He's an elite and switchable defender, though I don't know if he can guard all 5s or most 1s yet, but his potential on that end is obviously tremendous. He's got ridiculous wingspan, he's got great mobility, he's got great IQ, and he can bang a little bit in the post, though it's definitely not his strong suit. Offensively, I think he's going to struggle a little bit at first. He's going to have to adapt to the modern game a great deal. Again, the strength thing is like a real issue, I think. And I think he's going to have a problem with stamina, like getting gassed, just because he might have to be doing a lot on the defensive ends to keep this team above water potentially. He's going to be able to initiate a lot of pick and rolls, dribble handoffs, a lot of actions that'll showcase his passing for sure. And with like good cutters around him, Vassell and Sohan are pretty good cutters. I think he'll actually like average probably 3 assists a game this year as a big, which as like a rookie center in the modern game is like pretty damn good. So I feel pretty good about Wembanyama going into the season, though I definitely think his scoring is going to take a little bit to get up to speed. But I think once he sort of adapts and once his 3-ball starts to fall, because he wasn't an elite shooter in France, he just shot a lot of them on like pretty poor efficiency, and we just got to see all the highlights. Once that sort of catches up with the rest of his game, I think he could be pretty damn good. And I definitely think, again, the X's and O's of this team are a little bit muddy because we don't really know like the extent of Trey Jones' capabilities as a playmaker. Again, he might just be a game manager. And Devin Vassell, his scoring, while it's great right now, is not elite. I don't think there's any like defined lead option on this team, because Keldon Johnson averaged the most points per game last year, but Devin Vassell is pretty versatile, and his game is like a good bit more defined on that end, I would say. And then Wembanyama is also going to have to get a lot of shot attempts if they want him to sort of adapt to the modern game, to the NBA more quickly. And then defensively, this team could be okay. I think Wembanyama could make them pretty good at times, but I think with him off the court, they're going to suffer a lot. Even their veteran presences, like Cedi Osman and Doug McDermott, are pretty awful defenders. Devontae Graham is not a good defender either. So there's not a lot of defense off the bench. They have some good defenders in the starting lineup. I think Sohan, Vassell, and Keldon Johnson is a perfectly adequate defensive wing group. But I don't really know if Trey Jones can lock up, and this team just seems kind of like whatever on defense. They're not going to finish probably outside the top 20 if I had to guess. But, maybe Wembanyama could get them over the hump like Rudy Gobert did for the Jazz year after year after year. So if I had to predict a record for this team, I would probably put them somewhere in the 23 to 29 win mark. I don't think they're going to crack 30, though they might potentially have 2 20-plus point per game scorers who are also solid on defense, and then decent role players around them plus Wembanyama. So I think they could exceed 30 like marginally, but I don't think they're going to get anywhere near the play-in. The only reason I put them below the Blazers in the West standings is because the Blazers are going to be hanging on to Dame for way too long, and I imagine just his presence is going to elevate them over this Spurs team who has no one in the same realm as Dame, really talent-wise. So yeah, that's my 10 minutes on the San Antonio Spurs. If you like this video, please subscribe, you know the drill, call to action. And hopefully I have my Twitch/Discord/ everything else linked below. You guys know where to find that. And I'll catch you on the next one.